On this week's episode, we take a trip into the black and white past of the Minutemen and this extraordinary being. Hello and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf and a bunch of other stuff. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A. That was the smoothest intro you have ever done.
One take, Charlie. That's my name.
Not that anyone would know, but often there's a little stumble in that, and you just you ripped through it so fast. I was like, oh shit, he nailed it.
Yeah, because I want to talk about this thing, but before we do, you and I haven't caught up since last week. So what's new in your world? It's Thanksgiving week as we record on a Monday.
Yeah, man. Just what's new in my world? When I'm not playing Dungeons and Dragons, I'm trying to catch up on all of the podcasts and shows that are impossible to catch up on. Remind
me, have you become a fan of the comic series Die yet? I know we've talked about it with Drew, and he has his issues, but with all the D&D you play, I'm curious if you would like that series. You should check it out.
This is the Kieran Gillen one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. This is the one I heard him speak about at horror comics or something at Comic-Con. It did look interesting, but no, I haven't explored it yet.
Now that we're past volume 1, it's getting a little tedious, but if he and the team can nail the that sort of mid section. I don't know how many volumes they have planned for. I was going to say seasons. How many volumes they have planned for, or how many issues in general, but it seems like one of those books that they should get over and done with fairly quickly. Ideally it'd be something that they could collect volumes 1 through 4 into like a really nice hardcover.
Are they that many volumes in already?
They're 1 in. I think they're 3 issues into volume 2, if I'm not mistaken.
I was like, holy shit, that's like way older than I thought. I thought it was just a year-ish old.
Yeah, but they're just cranking through them. Like they had a plan, and it's obviously selling well enough. So it's not one of those like Hickman titles that comes and goes every 8 months, and you're like, oh, there it is, I guess. Enjoy it and move along. Speaking of which, I have been getting reports from other friends that the Hickman's X-Men sort of post House of X run, and now he's consulting. He's not writing them as deliberately as he was House of X, Powers of 10. But I've heard that's going fairly well too. So I may have to dip back in from time to time. The problem, there's like 7 sort of spin-off stories, each focusing on a different aspect of X-Men, or like a mutant team members. So it's kind of, they're going to get into the same trouble they've always had, which is like there's just too many threads to follow, and they did such nice tight storytelling in House of X, Powers of 10 that I would almost rather they just have kept that going, and it's just like one continuity.
Definitely. I feel so bad because after our last catch up on comics and my enthusiastic endorsement of this comic shop that I'd gone into that's relatively new, and I just haven't been back. Honestly, I haven't even I didn't fill out the pull list thing that I meant to fill out, and it's just that overwhelm. It's a thing that comes up from time to time, and just that there's so much good media to consume that it's difficult to pick and choose. I mean, I definitely feel that a paralysis of choice kind of thing a lot, and I don't want to go spend money on more comics that are just going to sit on my shelf, as are all those Just Imagine Stan Lee books that are right there.
Yeah, this is a problem. I sort of hit this back in August, and we've talked about it online and offline too. My shelf is getting too full, and at some point I'm just not going to have space anymore, even if I offload some of those new books or new issues to the iPad, which increasingly for single issues I'm doing, unless there's like a really cool variant or a collectability angle to single issues. I'm just finding more and more the iPad. Especially now that I have an iPad Pro. Did I let you know I had an iPad Pro?
I didn't know you got that. So
yeah, upgraded since as a work gift to myself this year.
what screen size did you get on that?
Great question. I deliberated on that for the longest time because other than the screen size, they're exactly the same specs. Same processor, same everything. You can even get the same, different sizes. I mean, the different hard drive space, all that's the same. The screen's the only differentiator.
Yeah.
And I was really thinking I was going to get the bigger one, the 14-incher. I think it's like 13.9, but let's just call it 14. I was going to get that one. I went into the Apple Store at least 5 or 6 times over the course of 2 weeks to play around and just be sure, because I didn't want the hassle of like getting one and be like, nah, and then taking it back. And then, you start to get apps on that thing. It's a lot harder to undo a buying decision like that. So went in, played both of them. I was convinced I was going to get the 14-inch. And as I was playing with it the final day, I was like, you know what? I think that's just going to be too big. And sure enough, I am liking that slightly smaller screen. It's exactly the right size for my use case. Although plenty of online forums, these questions are everywhere. And a lot of people are like, look, man, it really comes down to what you specifically want to get out of it. The bigger one, while it's great, it is harder to, like, the whole point of an iPad for me is portability. Yeah. Like I don't want any reason that I can't pop it in my leather bag and take it with me as like when I leave the office. I don't leave my laptop at the office, take the iPad with me. It's supposed to be sort of anything that's not like video editing or like heavy design work. I'll just do it on my iPad. And I wanted the pencil because I'm like, well, I get it. And so I budgeted for the bigger one without the pencil. I'm like, you know what, if I shrink down, I can afford the pencil too. And just honestly, the size is exactly the right size for me. It's bigger than a regular iPad, so it does give you more breathing room for sure, which is great. Yeah. But it's just, I think that bigger one is really more of a laptop replacement. Yeah. And the slightly smaller one is just like, no, this is like what the iPad should have always been. And then here it is. So that's where I fell.
I hate the sizes of the iPads. This drives me so crazy. I'm so happy that I got one last year when it was 9.7 on the iPad.
You like that to
me is the perfect size. And now the new iPad, not Pro, is 10.2 inches. The iPad Air is 10.5 inches. The smaller iPad Pro is 11 inches, and the larger one is 12.9. And it's like, what are you doing? Why? It's so frustrating to me. Like, and this is the thing that has occurred to me lately. Why don't you make them the size of a printed paper that we have had for decades and decades and decades? Make an A5 size. Make a B5 size. Make a B6 size, or like that's your phone or whatever. Like, just like give it an analog to something in a physical life, because to me, I mean, you're totally right to like go to the store and check it out, because to me, it's like, I don't know if I want a 10.2 or a 10.5. Like, that could make all the difference to me.
Yeah.
And I get that one has like better features, but to me, it would be such a better apples to apples comparison. Like, if the Air and the iPad and the Pro were all 10.5, then I would go, okay, now this is a features comparison. But part of me is like, I want the Pro features, but I think that extra like 1.3 inches is going to be too much. Like, it's just going to be wobbly. The 9.5, I'm already terrified of dropping this thing on my face.
I think
I'm like reading in bed.
Definitely the case with the 13-incher. I said 14 before, you're right. It's 13. It's definitely the case with the 13. It's almost too big. Like, you can't one-hand it. That was the big problem. Like, I want to be able to like one-hand this thing without it having to be on my lap if I needed to. And so that's too big for that purpose. But this 11, I mean, I have the 11 in a nice kind of folio case, and it's like, it's perfect. If anything, you almost look at the iPad you come from, and I had like an Air, like the first Air circa 2013. Yeah. So I was, 6 years in, I was kind of due for an upgrade anyway. And I really wanted to get more like work use out of it. My Air had become kind of a personal device at best. And it was just kind of getting less and less and less use as my phone was more powerful, blah, blah, blah. But the 11 inches actually, I agree with you. I think the analog to paper is hugely important, because there's so many things that you're like, if this was just the size of paper, this would be so much easier. But I mean, like, Microsoft OneNote is beautiful on it. Like, I think you would get used to it. And it's mainly because the bezel is exactly the same width all the way around. So it doesn't have the button at the bottom, or those kind of like, how on the Air and maybe the new iPad, it's like the bezel on the top and bottom, or the traditional kind of thicker, and on the edge it's thinner. That's fine, I guess. But the Pro removes all that, just makes it equal. So it's, I don't know, it's worth looking at. I almost wish that the Pro was the iPad, and then like they just iterated on sizes and not have this. Like, it's weird that they're going back to like, now we're not calling it the Air anymore. It's just iPad again. Yeah, but it's like, well, what version? How do you keep track of it?
But there is a new Air.
What's the difference? I mean, I get
weight.
why the Pro's different, but the Air so there's an iPad that's not an Air that looks like the Air.
Yes.
Well, Jesus Christ. Well,
Yeah,
this is
there's an
not the
iPad,
Apple.
an iPad Air, and an iPad Pro. This is the Mac line before Steve Jobs came back.
Yeah.
Where when he came
yeah.
back and he was like, "Why do you have 8 different lines of Macs? This is so
Yeah.
confusing." Pro and non-Pro, done.
It's
Like,
amazing to me that nobody in that culture at Apple can replicate his just violent attention to detail and like loathing of complication. It's like, how many people worked under him or directly with him who can't channel that? I get you. I mean, you don't want to be an asshole like he was to some extent, but at the same point, we're the people going, hey, look, there's a reason we were so successful. It's because we had very clean, easy to understand product lines. Even when the iPad, the iPod was coming out and there was like the Nano and the
Yeah.
Mini, like that still made sense. You look at like the icons and it's like, okay, there's like 3 different versions of iPod, and then pick your color and then pick your megabyte size or whatever, gigabyte size. Geez, I mean,
I do think part of this, I think, is that some of the like iPad Air versus iPad, I honestly think I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't read anything on this, but my consumer perception of it is like, this is just consumer testing at large. Like they really just want to know, like, what do people actually prefer there? Can we get away with like a 0.3 inch, greater screen if that means reducing some weight and changing some memory settings or whatever they're doing that's different, but I'm super happy with the 9.7 and I just hope it lasts me for 6 years and they decide to just keep one 10 inches because I don't want to walk around with like a 17-inch fucking iPad.
Other thing to mention about the 12.9, as we become the Applecast here, the other thing about the 12.9 is that it doesn't fit comfortably on a airplane little cart, the little tray in front of you.
Oh, man.
It sticks off the sides. And so the 11 is kind of the biggest you can get while having it kind of adhere to those traditional use cases.
Yeah. No, great point. And see, to me, so many, because another thing I don't know that you and I have ever discussed on the show is that, but I think you probably know, is that I'm like bag obsessed. Like I have like a stupid amount of backpacks and shoulder bags and things like that. I just love like having the perfect carrying case for whatever it is I'm carrying. And often those are scaled to paper size, like notebook size. So anytime Apple changes something by a couple inches, it's like, oh, dude. Or if they're not scaled to paper size, they're scaled to like laptop size. So, I had a perfect 11-inch sleeve for my Chromebook that, is just a little bit too big for my iPad and would be just a little bit too small for any other iPad. That kind of thing.
See, I weighed that when I was looking too. I had the same exact like consideration. Here's a question though. At one point, do you think laptops officially become like desktops in that they are rarer in the wild and they're more like, specialty use cases, and everybody just has some version of a mobile device, whether it be a phone, a phablet, a tablet, etc. Or just, I mean, God, I'm even wondering, like, at some point, was it just like, does somebody just walk around with like a bunch of voice AI and they don't even have a screen? Is it just that? Are we on the cusp?
We're on the cusp for sure, but honestly, I think the fact that like laptops are still like essential is that's such an interesting case. Now, how many years are we into the iPad? It's like 11 or something, right? Or
2010.
Okay.
2010? Yeah, I think 2010.
Was it?
Yeah. That was the first one came out.
Like we've been aware of tablet computing for a while, and every year it's like, oh, this will be the one that replaces your laptop, and nope, it doesn't.
But I'm seeing more and more, if you go into a coffee shop, I'm seeing more and more people have iPads with the case that has the keyboard built into the case.
True.
And I'm seeing these like just these little, and who knows what they're doing with them. It could be any number of things, but like I'm seeing it more and more where I never saw that with like Chromebooks or like the little sort of like laptop light computers that I think they still might sell. Like the Chromebook kind of invented that category, but everybody else sort of piled in. I'm seeing iPads take on that more. And then I've seen more and more people just do business on their phones. Like their phones are big enough to handle it now too. So it's interesting.
I hate the big phone. We could keep ranting about this. Will be my Techtivus for this year, my airing of grievances. But yeah, I got a bigger phone, and I got the XL Pixel, and I do not like it. And I don't hate it. It's a beautiful piece of tech, but it's like just too big for my hand, and it drives me crazy. And because I have an iPad, it's like, I don't even need this. I wish this were just the the text, and now obviously a camera, sure, but like, I don't want to do work on that. But I do have an endorsement, which is I got this Logitech Bluetooth keyboard when I got my iPad, and it is awesome. I
Oh,
love
good.
the feel of this thing with these like little scalloped keys, and it was $20, and that to me is a pleasure to write on. The only problem is that the iPad, because there's no mouse, you're constantly kind of interacting with the screen, and it'll do that thing where like then the keyboard jumps up, like if you're in Google Docs, like
Mhm.
did you mean to get all this formatting back or whatever. And so you're constantly like minimizing that, and there's a lot more operational stuff that you have to do, where if I'm typing on a laptop, I don't have to worry about that. But I didn't know that was possible. I didn't think I would enjoy writing on an iPad so much, but I think it's amazing.
This podcast sponsored by Logitech. Logitech bringing keyboards to iPads since 19 not no
Whatever.
1920
Yeah.
whatever. No, let's jump in because we are I hit you up earlier today. We had sort of loosely discussed doing these watching the Watchmen episodes kind of like every two, just so we have more to talk
Every
about.
2 episodes. Yeah.
But holy the fuck, like last night the greatest episode of TV titled This Extraordinary Being
I mean, yeah.
aired. And I was just like, we have to talk about this right now. I can't go through Thanksgiving and not share thoughts. So let's just jump right in. And my first question to you was, like overall, did you like it? Did you like it as much as I and apparently a lot of other people
Yeah.
did, or were you sort of like, I don't know?
No.
Meh.
There were times where I just stopped and I was like, this is such incredibly smart filmmaking. Like I can't get over the way they're paying off stuff and echoing stuff from the movie and the comic and earlier episode. I was just blown away by everything about this, like execution and writing and acting and like, I mean, just, the black and white and the color and the use of all that stuff. Oh, jeez. It was so unbelievable.
If
Like
they'd
this.
never made a show called The Watchmen, they're just like, hey, look, we're gonna do a one-off. Like HBO paid us to make like the Hooded Justice origin story movie. This would be it. This would be perfect.
Yeah.
Just as that, I would
Yeah.
totally accept this. I mean, you'd have to rub off the kind of the beginning and the end with Angela, but like,
Yeah.
it's such a great and my favorite part about this is that in Watchmen lore, so many of the characters, especially with before Watchmen, and I know some fans don't acknowledge that, like it's like the book is pure Watchmen, and then I think the HBO show is becoming more and more sort of accepted as like official canon. Before Watchmen's kind of the hit and miss. You find people who do like it or accept it, those who don't. We won't even talk about Doomsday Clock. But the nice thing about this is that Hooded Justice was always the most mysterious character. No one's ever really done a take on him. Like before Watchmen did a lot of really cool stuff with the original Night Owl and Silhouette. Delved into their backstories more. The book itself, Watchmen has like one of those at the end of one of the chapters. There is a newspaper sort of interview with Hooded Justice, so it does give more context to the character. But it was one of those that no one ever picked up on. So for Damon Lindelof to go, hey, if I'm going to build a show around something, let's take kind of one of those nuggets that really hasn't been mined that much yet, and picking Hooded Justice and then putting this slant on it made it way more interesting. Not that it wasn't interesting. There's all the mystery of who he was or what he was always kind of there. But the fact that now we have a definitive backstory that's even more complicated and interesting than I would have imagined just makes what a great choice to take that character, this guy, to tie in. And I mentioned at the beginning, like I was like, man, he's bringing up a lot of important topics around race and the future that he better be really careful, because this is just going to be a whole lot of nothing if he doesn't tie this together well. And last night's episode really gave me the confidence, like, holy crap, this is going somewhere. This is going somewhere very deliberate. And I was always on board, but now I'm like, man, now I'm comfortable about like, hey, I don't care where we're going, but it's going somewhere, and I'm ready to visit that destination.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'd read this. I waited until I knew when we were going to record. I saw this headline come up from Polygon about how, they basically I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the title of the article, but it was HBO's Watchmen changed comic canon without changing anything.
Yeah.
And that way that like Lindelof found a gap in like exactly what you're describing. Like he was the most mysterious figure, but he was also central and important.
Mm-hmm.
But so it left this big blank slate to like, insert it in there. And I think it contextualized it in that way of like they don't have to mess with the original stories at all.
Not at
But
all.
they
At all.
and because it fits into the Tulsa riots, it's like, oh my God, this, or the Tulsa massacre, like this, you just centered this in like a real life episode and the comic history and your own alternate history. And I mean, it was just genius. Like,
And it makes this whole time I've been kind of going, well, why Tulsa? Like, what a weird thing to, I mean, it's great that he's exposing that history, but I'm like, what a weird thing to just go, we went from New York in the book and now we're going to do Tulsa. But last night really makes, okay, that's why Tulsa. It's because that guy, he has a history in that place. So now it feels even more enshrined in Watchmen canon than just kind of a cool idea or a take for a TV spinoff. It's like, no. Hooded Justice was always connected to Tulsa as much as the rest of the team is to New York. Let's just say it's as much a part of that fabric of the story based on last night and that's kind of that was the big missing piece for me. It was just, why Tulsa? Like, that was always nagging at me. Like, why, and I'm still curious, like, what the big end game is. Like, we talked last week about, Watchmen, the graphic novel, is it's a bunch of personal stories, but the overarching arc is global thermonuclear war and how do we avert it, right? That's a very big macro event. And I've been wondering, like, what's Tulsa's a very, small by comparison kind of thing. Like, what is that about? And that's always been nagging at me. And now it's like, oh, that's why Tulsa, that guy. And it's curious, like, if you kind of look ahead, I know you don't, but Lady True, talked about in the coming soon, like, she's got some plan and Tulsa's important to that beyond just, hey, I'm going to build a shrine here that's going to last the ages. Like, so it's all kind of coalescing in this beautiful way. And you're right. I like that point. Like, they didn't retcon anything. Like, Hooded Justice's relationship with Captain Metropolis was always part of canon. That's not new. I did read it. Don't go to Reddit after these things, folks. It's just not healthy. I read somebody like, they made Hooded Justice gay for PC reasons. I'm like, okay, in the book in the 80s, it was highly suggested that he had something going on with Nelson Gardner. Whether he's bi, gay, who cares? That wasn't invented for the show. That, in fact, they took that thread and really made it more interesting last night. I mean, and you can almost see too, just the fact that this was the first guy to put on a mask and fight crime, and like everything else is built on his shoulders. Just the symbolism of that in this series, I think, was perfect. It's like, you take this character, we didn't know much about him before, we knew a little bit, a lot of mystery, and now he's literally the linchpin to this entire season of TV we're watching. Yeah,
it's perfect. Are we done? Are we done with the episode?
Sure. No, but like, go ahead. Sorry.
The other thing is like, and then separating it. You touched on this earlier, but separating it from the whole Watchmen universe, just as a superhero or crime-fighting vigilante origin story, this was better than anything we've ever seen on screen.
Oh my God!
Like, I can't remember if we did this on air or where this conversation happened. I just had this conversation recently about like sort of Batman's motivation beyond, like once he gets vengeance basically for his parents' murder, then, what is it? Like, you don't really get in the origin story how he cares so much about Gotham, right? You just see a kid impacted by this terrible tragedy. But like, here's Hooded Justice, like that, that moment when he shoots Red, like as a cop, approaches him and Red doesn't recognize him, and he shoots him and then realizes like, I'm going to put the hood on and go in this warehouse and deliver some justice. It was like, all this fits. It all fit, like the whole history, this whole thing of like, the Tulsa massacre and like your discrimination on the police force and off the police force, and like this weird, racist cabal and like this sort of secret organization. I was just like, it all works.
and they still had their cake and ate it too, with a weird little Watchmen twist of basically like a mesmerizing ray. Like the fact that this like crazy like Bond villain sort of like hypnosis machine existed in then, and the fact that Will took it and appropriate, like the biggest
payoff.
We'll go back and talk more, but like the biggest shock to me was, he did kill Judd.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't kidding. He just didn't have to physically do it, but the fact that he had that thing and he used it to basically force Judd to kill himself, like I mean, who knows how he may have used it, many, many times since,
Yeah.
as well too. But just that reveal was kind of like, oh, because
Yeah,
I thought that was going to be, I thought him being responsible was probably the least likely scenario for how Judd died. I thought it was going to be way more complicated than that, but nope.
yeah, that
Nope.
was amazing. And I know we want to get into like some theorizing about Judd and some other things. I wanted to point out a couple of the cinematic things that just like blew my mind as we're talking about the warehouse thing. And when he goes into the grocery store
Yeah.
and they start shooting at him,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like it's not like he and then he jumps out the window, and that echo of in this universe the Minutemen like TV show in which Hooded Justice comes breaking in a window of a
Yeah.
grocery store to foil a crime was so like in such a brief second was like what a commentary on how we remember sort of civil rights events or something
Yeah.
like that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, in this case, like, he's and I think sort of tied in my head to that is the when we have that opening scene from their own TV show where Hooded Justice unmasks and it's a white guy and you're like, oh, they didn't even know. Like Rorschach's Journal, Hollis Mason, none of these people like even knew the identity enough to, in the Polygon article, they talk about how Hollis Mason, like in his biography, theorized about who it might be, but he didn't even know, you
Mhm.
know? And there was that interesting thing of like, oh yeah, because they don't know, of course it's this white guy hero that busts into a delicatessen and busts up this,
Yeah.
this gang. But in reality, it was a black hero and the gang was trying to kill him and he had to bust out
Yeah.
of the
The
grocery
other thing
store or whatever.
I love that
Ugh.
juxtaposition too, because the thing that I thought pretty quickly on, like once they try to hang him, they let him down, and then he
Oh,
goes and he sees that rape or whatever robbery in the alleyway.
yeah.
The fight sequences are so just I mean, it is as realistic as I've ever seen
Yeah.
fight depicted in any sort of comic medium. Maybe outside of Daredevil. The Daredevil TV series has some really good moments too, but it's kind of crazy to juxtapose Last Night with those hyper, Zack Snydery
Yeah.
Minutemen things that we saw where the fighting is just very stylized. And here you have a guy just literally smacking the hell out of these people, and it's not glamorous. It
Yeah.
looks like it hurts. Even knowing that it was stunt people, I'm like that.
Yeah.
I feel hurt just watching this,
Yeah.
and to have that just keep. And he's just like, almost like he's on speed, just tearing through these guys. Boom, 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 smack, smack. Like I actually had to turn it down because it was so
Oh yeah. Oh
violent.
my God.
But just you need that juxtaposition of sort of that over the top, highly stylized Minutemen thing that we saw to make
Yeah.
this even more impact. Because if we just saw that, it would be like, wow, that was pretty real. But you're
Yeah.
thinking in your head about how you saw Hooded Justice before, which is a neat trick to kind of set this up in the right way for maximum impact, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. You see the Zack Snyder version of it in the like TV show clip where the
Yeah.
blood is like kind of spraying out in slow motion, and then he has like a tagline at the end, cheese.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then you see like the really rough and tumble part of it. And what I loved so much about that was it definitely also was an echo of the Dan and Laurie fight in the alley. And
Yes.
but there was such like righteous anger to it. It wasn't like two people going like, yeah, let's kick some ass because these are bad guys and we're good guys. It was like, this is a man who is like these events have happened just prior to that. And this, something snaps in his head, and he just very righteously gets his anger out, and then to go home to his wife and say like, "You're right, I'm angry." Like that was, oh Jesus.
I'm glad that happened because they had that exchange before where she's like, you're angry. He's like, what? And he's sitting there all calmly, and she's like, and that's why you're angry. And I was like, that doesn't explain anything.
Yeah.
And then but then to see it later on, then it paid off. And I was like, for about 5 minutes, I'm like, that was a weird line to deliver right then.
Totally agree. Yeah, I was like, I don't understand the relationship here.
It's like, that's why you're angry. He's sitting there calmly talking to you. Like, who are you to judge? But then you realize who she is. Like, oh, I see. Well, that would have been the only thing I would have changed is just the delivery of that line, maybe further along. So you had a little more context for her and him. Cause I'm like, is she his sister? Like you don't know at first until like they make out. Then it's like, oh, well, clearly girlfriend or something. But then who, but then the baby, and I had almost forgotten about the baby. So I'm glad they actually showed that flashback. I'm like, good.
Well, and so the other echo or juxtaposition I wanted to bring up before we get to the wild speculating was they make that point about how I'm sorry, I don't remember his wife's character's name, like that she, encourages him to paint the white face, and so he ends up painting this little sort of Lone Ranger white mask, and then his son ends up imitating it, but Sister Night imitates that in reverse. So
Yeah.
not even knowing that this happened, she's been painting this black Lone Ranger mask on her face. And it was like, oh my God, like just the smarts to kind of put that together. I mean, I know that's like a little detail, but that's just what makes the show so good. Please don't
His
little
wife's
off
name
this.
is his wife's name is please don't little off this. Please don't. His wife's name is Ruth Williams.
Cool.
Ruth. Yeah, I keep thinking about that kid in the restaurant with the stick of dynamite, and it's getting closer and closer, and he's just sitting there calmly like, watch. And you're like, but you blew your hand off clearly before. What's going on? And just watch what I
Yep.
do. It's like, okay, all right. It's like, I guess we go. Now, one of the other things I really loved about this episode was the I'm a sucker for any of the Minuteman stuff. So my favorite two before Watchmen volumes are the Ozymandias one, which we've talked about on this episode, and then the Minutemen one, which is just unbelievable. It's like if you liked last night's episode, go freaking buy that before Watchmen Minutemen series, because it's a lot of the same stuff. It's much more serious than you'd think, and there's a lot of sort of similar themes. I wonder if they didn't read that or absorb some of that when they were writing this, because I saw a lot of little not Easter eggs or touch points, but just like, oh, there's a lot of common thread here, stylistically, story wise. One of my favorite parts though was the guy, whoever they cast to be Nelson Gardner, was so spot on. The
Oh my
second
God.
before he even said his name, he walks into their apartment. I was like, holy shit, there's Captain Metropolis. He's like, I'm Nelson Gardner. I was like, yes, you are. My God, they found like the exact right guy to play that guy. And then seeing
Yeah.
that, how that relationship actually started, and then seeing that. And my other favorite part was when he's revealed to the press for the first time, and they're in
Yeah.
that room that I didn't go back to the Snyder movie to see how close it was, but the room
Yeah.
looked very similar to the room
Yeah.
that they show numerous times in the Snyder movie. And then they actually did this beautiful thing where they sort of hazily blurred the other Minutemen. So you see them there. You see like a vague kind of comedian sort of person and a Mothman, but they don't focus on them because they are not the focus of the story. Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis are, and I liked that you weren't distracted, but you still knew exactly where they were and where that fits into the continuity of the graphic novel. Like I love that, just that little touch.
Yeah, it was. I had the same feeling too of like it's all kind of set up in the Watchmen graphic novel. I don't know if they ever get explicit, but it's like they have their own Avengers mansion kind of thing, like where a couple
Yeah,
of those scenes take place. And yeah, as soon as that happened, even the framing of it, I was like, I swear this is like comic book framing of this panel, like I said, this seems like I've seen it before. And especially to betray him right in front of the cameras was that was like a huge story point, I thought too. And like I don't know, just to put it all in that context. I mean, I'm just enjoying the crap out of this. Like, this is just so cool, everything they're doing. And I also love when you have a show like this, one of those things I longed for with Game of Thrones, where you just sometimes you wanted like, please don't jump around in this episode. Like
yeah,
you've got that, like we've got so many threads dangling. We just really need to like tie one up right here.
yep,
And
yep.
so to have this full exploration of that, and in such a cool way too, like with the nostalgia pills that Angela's taken, it's like, oh, I just, there's already like it's one of those things like, what's the price that she's going to have to pay after this,
What do you think the sort of Schindler's List? It's his mom playing the piano, but like, why
mhm.
do you think she kept popping in and she was the only one in color? Every time that character would pop in and sort of be playing piano in the background as the scenes changed.
I don't have any deep thoughts about that. I wondered that too. I noticed too that she
Oh,
was
you know
in
what?
color, but
His mom
she
is Ruth, I think. I don't think that's his wife's name. I might be mistaken on that. Sorry.
oh right. But he in an earlier episode, I somehow we knew that he used to go to the movies where his mom played the piano during the silent pictures, and that's where he like, you know, first encountered that hero, that black sheriff. right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's true. Yeah.
or maybe we just saw a clip of that and we didn't know who was seeing that. I can't remember. So I think it was just. I think it had something to do with like in his memory, he's in a black and white theater and his mom was in color or something. I didn't
Nice.
I didn't try to, I mean, I have no idea, but yeah, you're right. It stood out in the black and white. And there's right at the beginning of it, I think, because I started rewatching the episode before we hit record just to kind of refresh myself. Right when Angela, like, sort of like enters the memories. Like I'm pretty sure the police uniform she's wearing is in color, and then sort of like she looks around and everyone's in black and white, and it sort of pans back up and it's in black and white.
Yeah, you're right. But
Yeah,
the mom playing the piano is the only person, and she pops back in at least 4 or 5 times, and she's
yeah.
always in color. And it's always I'm wondering if that isn't Angela's. And think about it at the end, Angela. It's that I think it's the mom who tells her to come back to the present. Basically, it pulls her back out of that. Because remember, there's
Yeah,
that older woman.
yeah. It's an older woman.
I think that's who that is. I'm
Well,
wondering. Well,
oh,
the point I'm making is I'm wondering if the piano playing isn't the thing that keeps Angela at least tethered to reality while she witnesses this. I just
there's also
couldn't.
there's also the drumming, which was like very
Oh
blatant to
yeah.
me, where it starts with the drum roll of the police officer, and then there's a lot of places where there's just percussion in a scene, and I couldn't. I mean, that to me was a weird callback to Birdman, which
I
has
was
a
gonna say
completely
it felt,
percussive
yes.
soundtrack. Um, and I assume they were sort of playing. I mean, how could they not be aware of that? It won an Academy Award, so it was like
Very
had to be.
intentional.
Yeah, exactly. It had to be sort of playing with that, like, oh, this was effective in confusing reality and fantasy in that movie, and we're going to put it in here. But here's my question about the old lady. I took that to be, I could be way off here. I took that to be Will's wife when she was Angela's grandmother.
Ah, that's exactly who it is because I'm looking at it now, and
Okay.
it is her wife. So it is his wife. She's crying, saying, "Don't you ever, we don't want to hear from you again." She disappears, and then an
Yeah.
older woman walks into frame who looks exactly. I'm assuming, and she's touching Angela's face. I'm watching this in real time as I say it. That's exactly who this. That's Will's wife. So that's Angela's grandma. And
But
then
that
she
doesn't make
turns
any.
into color.
Yeah.
She's
So that's
saying.
her memory, not Will's memory at that moment.
It's her memory sort of overriding Will's memory. It's like
Yeah.
that's the bookend. It's like, oh, so that's Will's memory, and then she sees that and goes, "Hey, that's my grandma." And then she walks into frame, going, "Come on home, honey." And then she pops up in the true office. Which I was surprised. Were you surprised by that to just see Lady True hanging out in a chair, just like, oh,
I
love
love
it.
how annoyed she is, sort of like, I've been babysitting you all this time. You're
Well, we
finally
don't know
awake.
how much time has passed. That's the best
Yeah.
part. It's like this could be 2 weeks. It could be a day.
Yeah.
We don't know. And they intentionally didn't tell us. It's not like you've been asleep for 3 weeks. Credits. It's like, nope. And she's got this weird sort of device on her that's pumping something in or taking something out. We don't know. That's crazy. Okay, so a couple more things, and then we can get into the wild speculation. The other scene that really, where I knew this was going to be one of the best episodes they've done, was when he brings Red in for the first time, when Will brings him in, and he's trying to book him, and Red's being all surly and racist and everything, and the cop goes, "What did you say to our patrolman?" He's like,
Yeah.
"You apologize to him," and I'm like, "Oh, that's a nice unexpected thing." And then you find out that they're completely just screwing around. It's not true. It's not genuine at all. It's part of a greater
Yeah.
conspiracy. But for like a hot second, I was like, oh, and then just to have that ripped out from under me, I was like, damn it. Well, now I'm on board because I just love that subversion. So
Yeah.
much of this subversion, like all along the way, like you're like, well, they're hanging him up, so he clearly lives, but what the hell? Like, how does he get, does he get revenge? Like you're constantly, and the best part about all this, remember that the flashback was one of the central tools used on Lost to tell stories. And it was always from a particular person's point of view. So you never knew. I mean, as the viewer, you assumed that what you were seeing was correct, but it was always through a character's point of view. And you never knew for sure if it was distorted or not by that character's experiences. Here, I feel like okay, she's taking somebody else's memories, so she's not misremembering. This is what Will experienced. So it's a little subjective, but she's still experiencing it this way. But I just love the fact that Lindelof used an old tool from the box to do this. It wasn't like, oh, I'll just throw a flashback in every once in a while for Lost fans. Like, no. I'm going to use that, but I'm using it very, very effectively.
Oh yeah.
In this context, I love that he's come so far. I'm so proud of him, Todd. Our boy's grown up. He's making great TV.
Let's not go too far.
righting the wrongs of his past. Yeah,
Director of Tomorrowland, or
writer of Tomorrowland. But he also wrote The Leftovers, which a lot of people like. And I don't know, maybe I haven't watched it. I can't say. A lot of people were like, yeah, you know what, he did good. Let's go though to the most important speculation. Judd Nelson at the end.
Judd Crawford.
Judd Crawford. Sorry. You didn't see Judd
raises
Nelson
one fist in the air and it freeze frames.
Don't you forget about me. No, Judd Crawford. Thank you. I was a little. What we're seeing was surrealist and dreamlike. So we're not, even though we were seeing very realistic fight scenes play out, that last sequence was incredibly, like, it was clearly against a green screen as he was on the hill talking to him. Like, it was very, very arch and very surreal and like very theatrical. Like even the blocking, like the way, like they're, Don Johnson's cheating out towards the audience as he's talking to Will in the chair. It looked like a stage play. Yeah. And I was just like, why are they taking that angle with it? Like, is what we're seeing here true? Because I feel like Judd was a much more nuanced character. Don Johnson played him way more nuanced as a character. So for him just to suddenly be like, I'm a
racist.
Well, not even that. That's not even necessarily true. Like it's not clear. It's just like, look, my grandpa, my grandpa was in the force. He was a Klansman. I mean, maybe he keeps the Klan robe to remind himself of what he shouldn't become. Like he never says, and we never hear. And so Will's just like, I don't care. And he starts to flash him with this little mind rapey device. And then like, we get the end of it. But so it's like, we know Judd Crawford is clearly not Dan Dryberg. So that theory, sadly, my little theory is completely shot to hell, and that's fine. So then the question is, okay, like he must have been related to one of those guys that either hanged him or was responsible for it. It's very likely he was the second shooter who came into Angela's home when she was passing out, who was like kind of standing above her, looking over her. That was probably him. But then it's like, okay, well, why? Like, why? I want to know more of his mind. I'm sure we'll get it before the end, but it was such as clean and as clear and as sort of easy to understand as the rest of the episode was. That dreamy sort of sequence was the only thing that was like, well, is this really what happened? I can't tell.
Yeah. Well, okay. So another part of that is, do you think Keen is telling the truth in that he took over one part of the 7th Cavalry and Judd took over another to keep those racists in line?
Not at all. No.
Okay. So you think that's BS, but Judd has there's some other thing going on with Judd, because I agree. Like it wrapped up.
I was going to say, I think Judd and Keen are working together. I don't think that's what it is.
That's okay. No, great. Yeah. They're working together, but Keen was still trying to mislead Mirabal.
Exactly.
So I mean, it's one of those things you point out. Like, this is Will's memory of the event and maybe not the truth.
Well, remember, Angela's sitting in that chair for a good chunk of that scene. Like, it's not just, oh God, what the hell's the guy's name? Who plays Will?
Louis Gossett Jr.
Thank you. Jeez, the name just escaped me. Louis Gossett Jr. is in the chair, but then it's Angela for a lot of it. And it just made me wonder, like, is this the memory fading? Is this nostalgia wearing off?
Yeah.
And she's getting just kind of, because it was really arch. Like, I'm just watching it like 56 minutes, 35 seconds. It looks like a stage play. Like, it's not shot like the rest of it is.
No. Right.
There's just something, it just makes me wonder, like, what is she seeing? What is she not seeing? I hope she confronts Will in the next episode for real, because he's obviously alive. He's at the true compound too, or was. Yeah. So I don't know. Well, what's your take about Judd? I mean, what's your take on Judd? If you had to, right here and now, you're the jury based on this evidence, what would you say Judd's deal is? I
was prepared before this episode to write off the Klan robe, like that this was a mistaken discovery. Like, it had either been planted there to cause her suspicion, or something else, like I was sort of prepared, like I don't think that's Judd's and we're gonna find out, like whatever.
Hmm.
When he said it's my grandfather's, it was like, or grandfather's, I think.
Others.
I was like, well, that's weird. Um, but then this one word he used drove me crazy, and he said it's my legacy.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, now that is not a neutral term in my mind.
No.
Like
No.
it's not my history, or it's a part of my past that I
My
need to.
heritage.
Yeah, even heritage would have been like a little on the, like, too much in the Daughters of the Confederacy, like,
Mm.
a trigger word kind of thing. But it would have made sense. Like, this is a piece of my past I need to remember, so that I don't do it, or as I don't fall too far into this or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there are a million ways to explain it, but he said legacy, and it was like, why would you want to carry this down? Like, why is this any part of your legacy? That's really weird to me.
Yeah.
So I really wonder what's going on. I don't want to give any credence to the idea that he's the second shooter, although it's like so too convenient in the way that the filmmaking has happened, that she gets shot and then he's the first face she sees. It's like,
Yeah.
that just feels like a clue in the language of this, the cinema that we're watching. But
But I mean, it makes sense structurally, because if a
right.
second shooter came in who wasn't Judd, he would have just killed. He would have seen her, because he saw her pass out. Like that, there was a figure standing over her as she's passing out. Why not just kill her? Instead, she's saved and she winds up in the hospital, and then Judd's there. It's like, okay, well then if it's not him, it would have had to been somebody really high up. Maybe it was Keen. I don't know. Somebody really high up who's like, oh, we need to keep her around for reasons that will be revealed.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm so, it's funny at the very beginning, as I'm rewatching the opening credits, it goes, this episode contains scenes with a strobing effect that could affect photos. And I was like, is that sort of like the, one of those affectations, like the Minutemen thing or something? And then I had forgotten about it until the very end. I was like, oh, there's the seizure strobe. I see what they were, because it's pretty,
Boy,
I have a headache
real.
just watching it right now. It's just kind of like, man, there it is. Interesting. Okay. So, I really wanted Judd to be Dan Dryberg. Damn it! That was making some. But here's the other.
I don't think the ages match up at all. I think Dan would have been like 70 or 80 years old.
Same age as Lori, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I think Gene Smart's 70.
Well, Don Johnson's 70.
I guess that's true.
But just,
yeah.
But anyway, but here's the other question. So like, she shows up, she goes into the I was gonna say the Dryberg house. She goes into the Crawford house, has a chit chat with his wife. We never get to see that discussion. So she knows something that she has not. Lori, Lori knows something we haven't been privy to. She knows something that Angela. Now Angela has more information, but Angela doesn't know either. So what is that thing she knows? Like, Lori has more cards, and they're intentionally not giving us. Like, she's not a point of view character for us. She was in that one episode when she's talking to Dr. Manhattan, but this isn't her story. I thought it was going to be a little bit more, but it's not. She is there to facilitate some stuff, but she's not. This isn't her story. I don't even think this is Lady True's story, because she's not. She hasn't been as cool as she is. She hasn't been around as much, and. I almost think she's a head fake. Like, hey, remember Adrian Veidt's crazy plan? This is This is crazy too, and she's eccentric. It's like, yeah, but we've seen that. Like, this seems to be a show that just keeps saying to us again and again, subtly and very forcibly, we have Watchmen. There's the book. There's the movie. There's all the supplemental material. Like, we have that. We've seen that already. So we're going to honor that and homage it, but this is totally new. Like, we're not going to follow the same tropes necessarily. We're going to do something new and interesting. I think that's truly, when we say stick the landing, that's truly what I'm imagining. It's like, how do you make this wholly original, honor the source material, sequelize that material, but still do something that material never did, and make it just as relevant? Like, that's the magic trick that we're going to see unfold over the last 3 episodes.
So here's my crazy idea about that, and I don't know whether I like this idea or not. In the comic book, the original comic, like you mentioned before, it was about nuclear destruction. How do we avert the absolute destruction of humankind and it played all on the, I can't remember what it's called. I mean, was it just called the nuclear clock or the doomsday
Doomsday.
clock or something like that? That was the real thing that these like social scientists called it, and they would say we're 5 minutes to midnight. And this was like a real thing in the 70s and 80s, I guess, of like how close we were to imminent destruction because of the tension between the USSR and America. So Veidt had this crazy idea to basically distract the world by dropping a giant alien psychic squid on, I think he does it on several cities, or is it just New York?
Just New York. Yeah.
Okay. So, it's such a crazy disaster and it makes everyone fear something from outer space. So they all band together and avert nuclear disaster. Is the show and all the TikTok, because we did hear Judd say TikTok early on. And then that's the, catchphrase of the 7th Cavalry.
Yeah.
By the way, I mix up cavalry and cavalry all the time in my head. It drives me crazy. I'm wondering if their TikTok, if this is a literal like metaphor for present day America, and the TikTok is towards like a race war.
Oh, interesting.
Or is this an allegory in that sense of like?
Just to know that they were working on a hypno-ray back in the 30s or 40s or whenever that was. 40s, I think. They were working on a hypno-ray at that point. Now Keen is they're working on the teleportation doorway. So like this, it's easy to draw a line from that to this and say, oh, that's kind of where they started, and that was their lo-fi tech of the time, even though it's crazy sort of Dr. Evil.
Yeah.
But to draw a line from that to now, it's like, okay, is that same mission still there, but they've had time and resources to really make more of it. And so what Keen's doing is just an extension of that. But then it's like, this is tricky for me because the world of the Watchmen is not the same as the world we live in now, meaning that deviation point, both in the fact that there were masked vigilantes, we never had those for real. We never had Dr. Manhattan for real. We never had, 16 years of Nixon or however many there were. Like, we never had any of that. So, yes, you could say racism as a core belief, is sort of universal. But the dynamics and the demographics of the U.S. now and our reality, and then the U.S. and Watchmen reality, are not the same thing at all. So to think that like there's this group of people that all they've ever wanted was to just wipe out black people, like it just seems with all the things going on in the show, and then just the world of the Watchmen, is that really like maybe that's the point? It's like, look, man, even with all that, that's still a problem. And and in this world, it's one that's so bad that they have to unite to stop it, like it's a superhero problem.
Right.
And that's fine, but it just seems it's like mixing two things that I don't know if they go together yet. I mean, not that you can't talk about racism in Watchmen, but like if that's the central tenet of this, which is, Lady Trish's like, we got to stop the next race. Well, they're going to use the teleportation doorway to teleport a racist into every black home to kill them all. Like, if that's where this is going, it's going to be too ridiculous.
Right.
And
I'm worried about this like too on the nose kind of thing of like, get it, America, wink, But I do see the possibility that Keen and True are playing the role of Veidt in that they are doing something that is objectively destructive because they have this weird ideal and a lack of any like moral compass that says, hey, you can't kill 1 million people to stop a distant possibility. Like that, that whole thing of like, I've done the math and this is what it works out to, is it's still like morally suspect.
There is the shadow.
I wonder if they're doing something like that, and I really like the fact that you've brought up the mesmer ray a couple times. Makes me wonder, like, was that what the tower is? Is this somehow going to be like, this is that at scale, and they are going to mesmerize all of Oklahoma and like, hypnotize them not to be racist or something like that?
That would be on the nose too. Like that would be just as ridiculous as like, a Klansman goes into every black household, and that will. I mean, like all of that seems. Here's the other thing.
But I'll tell you what I don't want to happen. I don't want this to be a Dr. Manhattan solves everybody's problems thing.
It can't be that. No, it can't be that.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see him pop up, but only after or tangential to, Angela, Wade, those guys doing this as their own team, regardless of Dr. Manhattan. The other thing we have to look at is that the shadow of Adrian Veidt has been hanging over this whole storyline, both metaphorically and in terms of scenes. It's like his scenes, he's the B story, but he always pops in kind of as like a reminder, like, remember, he's still out there. Yeah. And I wonder if that's not to say, look, he did, and especially after we got Wade's episode last week, which is like, really shows you the squid and the comic book sort of idea of Veidt's plan put into action. It makes me wonder if they're not like reminding the audience, look, this guy tried this once before and it didn't really work. Like, the world's not truly really isn't fixed. And Lady True clearly has a fanboy crush on him to some extent. She bought his company. She has a statue of him in her garden. So I'm almost wondering if her play isn't, look, I know what he did. Any idiot could have figured it out. And she's brilliant, so it'd be even easier for her. And she's like, I know what he did. It didn't really work. We're still heading in the same direction. It's only a matter of time. So he didn't think big enough. He didn't think like, I'm going to take it a step further. And then maybe, like, to your point, maybe it's like the mesmer ray, the epicenter will be in Oklahoma, but the waves, the ripples of that ray will go across the world. Because she is building, a giant antenna. Let's just be honest. Like, that clock is a gigantic antenna. Yeah. It's centrally located for all the reasons she explained before, but it's like, okay, you combine that. She's teamed up with Will. He's there. She knows he has that technology. I'm sure she could invent, she could have had something else too, but it all seems to be going to that, but it can't. The question then is, if that's the case, and even if it's like some other variation of that, is the point then for Angela to stop it? Is that the point of all this? Because in the book, it's like, look, we got to stop this guy. And then he already put into place. So then it's like, well, now we're helpless. So now what do we do? And it's sort of, Watchmen sort of has this just crazy, like, Dr. Manhattan leaves. Rorschach, basically gives him oh God, I've lost my vocabulary, Todd. He gives him what's the word that you use to describe I'm going to either do this or die. What's the ultimatum? Christ in heaven.
I was like, is this an object?
Ultimatum. I don't know why that word slipped my head. Anyway, Rorschach gives Veidt an ultimatum, and then he dies for it. Dr. Manhattan just leaves in disgust. Laurie and Dan Dryberg hook up. They just get it on because they didn't know what else to do. They're like, the world might be ending. Let's just screw. And that's kind of like where they all end up. And then Veidt realizes, Dr. Manhattan leaves him so sort of uncertain of himself that he's left to kind of just mutter in the darkness about, like, I did the right thing, didn't I? Surely I did, right? Makes me wonder if that didn't make him kind of slightly insane, which is why he's sort of a bit of a hot mess when we flashed to him on Europa. Yeah. Or I'm assuming it's Europa where his prison is. So I don't know. And then you got to wonder too, like, his B story, are we to assume that he gets free? So then it's like, okay, well, if he's free, then what? Like, there's a lot swirling around, and I keep wondering, is 3 episodes enough to wrap all this up? It should be, but he's in typical Lindelof fashion. He's asked a lot of questions, and we've gotten answers, thankfully, a lot of answers, but are the important answers going to come when we need them to?
We all hold our breath. I wonder, so my other thought is that I wonder if we will end up doing an episode a week now on this, because every episode has so much stuff in it, or if we'll be able to do one episode on episodes 7 and 8 and then another podcast after 9 and kind of fully digest it,
Oh, I hope so. Well, let's look ahead. Again, the next 3 are titled An Almost Religious Awe. That's next week. Then A God Walks into a Bar, and then See How They Fly. So we don't know.
I know. Honestly, it's the best thing to watch right now. Right?
Yeah. Who knew? Who knew? I always saw when HBO was, when we were watching Game of Thrones and HBO was like, coming soon. And you saw the like Dark Materials trailer and you're like, that looks badass. And then you saw the Watchmen thing. You're like, okay, I'll give it a watch. It's probably okay. And never realizing it was this is sort of the the level at which they aspired. It's like, holy crap.
And like I said a few weeks ago, after The Boys, I thought, what's Watchmen going to do? It's just going to end up looking like The Boys, like a bunch of anti-hero things.
Yep.
I just had no idea. And this is such an amazing piece of work. So, yeah.
Well, be said. I think we covered it.
Well, until our next episode, whatever that may be on, you can find all our past episodes at panelism.inc. That is a real top-level domain, .ink. And we're also on Instagram at panelism.inc. And that's probably the best place to chat with us and stuff like that. Anyway, that's all I got to plug.
Go buy, if you haven't read, I mean, there's some people watching this show who have not read the original graphic novel. Go and buy it, even while the show is still going on.
Honestly, for sure.
Go buy it. Go read it. I was telling another friend who's, he's not a big comics fan. I'm like, man, he's very literary though. So I'm like, if you're ever going to read comics as literature, Watchmen is one of the top 5 books you could pick. And it's like, read it and then watch the show, because he's been lamenting he has nothing to watch, which is insane to say in this day and age. I was like, but go read it, go watch. You can read it over Thanksgiving, and just jump in. And then if you really like it, go back and we have some before Watchmen picks we can send your way. So
no, I agree. It is in the best way, like supplemental material, and this is supplemental material for that, and it's all jumbled in you're not going to spoil anything by reading it, and you're also not going to be disappointed, I think, at least at this point. We'll see.
Definitely not going to spoil it. You'll just get more context, especially with Laurie Blake being who she is, like the way Jean Smart's playing her, and just you'll get a sense of like, oh, where did she come from? Like, what's her deal? Oh, that's why she's the way she is. Interesting. Yeah.
And Watchmen was always playing with the past. Watchmen came out, and it was like, there was already like a whole history of the Minutemen in their early versions. And then some of them, stayed around, and some of them, there were Night Owl 2 and Silk Spectre 2. And, it was like, so I feel like it all just kind of, it mixes together. And especially with the before Watchmen picks you got,
Yeah.
I would throw Silk Spectre in there just for the art alone. I mean, I think it's all Amanda Connor, right?
It's a fun little, it's very, very psychedelic in the 60s. It's a fun little story though. I like that. That one's actually, if you get the hardcover volumes, Minutemen and Silk Spectre are in the same hardcover book.
Awesome.
So you can get both of those. And I think Ozymandias is his own thing. I think that their version of I think it's called the Crimson Corsair. That was their sort of Tales of the Black Freighter.
Black Freighter, yeah.
And then Dr. Manhattan and Night Owl are in the same collection. You can get these all separately if you want to too. The only one I haven't read that I didn't really like was the comedian one. It's about his exploits in Vietnam. It just felt clunky. Ugh. And then the Rorschach one. That one's pretty good too. Although the art on that one is a little weird, and I like, this sounds strange to hear, I actually prefer the way Rorschach is kind of depicted in the Night Owl book, because you see a lot of Rorschach in that book too. Actually makes more sense, I think. So anyway, do check those out. Check us out. We'll be back next week. And until then, happy reading, happy watching.